Hi all, so I know you were all probably expecting the Misty Island Rescue review, and don't worry, it's coming. The script is almost done, but unfortunately, I'll be honest, I'm kind of stuck on the rewrite part. Don't get me wrong, it is getting a rewrite, or at least part of one, for how it could have been a masterpiece, or at least decent. I don't think we could get a masterpiece out of this one, but it's proving to honestly be the biggest challenge I've faced writing wise in this review series so far, and I've been having a bit of writer's block, so it's taking longer than expected. It will be out sooner rather than later though. It'll come out at least this year, I promise that. So heads up guys, I am finishing grad school this year, so thankfully and hopefully I'll have more free time to work on videos. I will have a full-time job, but I think I'll definitely have more time to work on stuff on weekends and in the evenings as I won't have any homework. But anyway, I didn't want you all to go without a video for too long again, so I thought I'd return to the other series I'm doing on this channel, the ranking of every Thomas episode by season. I had a lot of fun ranking the first season, and because it was shorter than the Hick Bombs, it obviously took less time to edit. Now, I think the general consensus on this season varies from person to person. Now don't get me wrong, most people love it or at least really like it, including myself, but people either rank it as their favorite classic season or just above season 1 and below season 3 to 5. Me, I'm one of the latter. I like it and it's one of the best seasons, but it's not quite my favorite. It has plenty of fantastic episodes, great character work, excellent sets, strong music as always, and just all around high quality writing and production value, and is undoubtedly a step up from season 1. But it isn't perfect, and there are a few reasons why I don't enjoy it as much as my favorite seasons, and I'll explain why at the end. So with that out of the way, let's just dive right back into it. The tiers are, similar to last time, okay, good, great, amazing, and S tier, which is phenomenal. With the okay tier added because there's one episode I think was just okay. Anyway, let's go. The okay tier. 26. Better late than never. This is honestly the weakest episode of the season and kind of one of the weakest of the classic series overall. It's not bad or anything, just kinda unmemorable. Thomas is being an impatient asshole and practically says he wouldn't care if something happened to Henry and James's passengers because they've been late as a result of the viaduct's repairs, but I don't think he meant it. He's just a little shit sometimes in his earlier years. Anywho, nothing much really happens in this episode besides Thomas learning to be more patient, again, and helps Birdie in a sticky situation. The plot with the big engines isn't even resolved. He doesn't apologize or anything, he just goes back to work after helping Birdie. Okay, I guess, but yeah, just unmemorable and the only okay episode in this season in my opinion. Okay tier. Also, I love the viaduct theme, very catchy and memorable, but I'm not the first person to say that. The good tier. 25. The Runaway. Now, like the last one, this is easily one of the less memorable and weaker episodes of the season, and even the entire classic series. Like I said, it's not bad or anything, it's just fine. Thomas is sent to the works for repairs, and upon coming back, his brakes give him trouble, and by accident, he becomes a runaway. I loved seeing Duck help on Thomas's branch line for a change while he was away, so that was probably the best part of the episode for me. Also, nice to see Harold again already. The action is a little underwhelming though when Thomas becomes a runaway, stark contrast to Old Iron where it's tense and the stakes feel high, huh? But yeah, this episode is fine. Very standard Thomas's branch line antics episode. 7 out of 10. 24. Percy's predicament. As Daisy settles into her new life, poor Percy is forced to deal with extra work and bullshit, so you feel bad for him, especially when he has a nasty accident thanks to the troublesome trucks, which was great by the way. Poor Percy is punished for being careless, which I disagree with. I just think he was tired and wasn't paying attention. Well, guess that is basically careless, but I don't blame him. And Daisy is given a second chance because she helped out more. So yeah, pretty standard episode. The Daisy saga in this season is nothing to write home about in my opinion, but it's still good. 7 out of 10. Great tier, or B tier. 23. Daisy. This episode's great, and the first one in the great tier. Better than Percy's predicament. Daisy is a fun, entertaining character in this season, but becomes much more likable and interesting in the Brenner era in my opinion. But, I'll be honest, I've never loved her. I like her, but I'm not like crazy about her character or anything. I personally don't understand why, for example, Tug wants to give her an episode of Sodor's Finest, but I respect it. That's just my point of view. But yeah, this episode is solid, funny, and entertaining. Daisy is stuck up, prissy, and acts too good for everyone, but we'll get karma for it later. I love the story and excuse of Daisy's fitter. It's hilarious, with some fan series even stating that it's a lie, with Cactus's theories even saying it was Diesel 10's idea, which I love. Overall, a solid episode, but nothing too special. 8 out of 10. 22. Woolly Bear. This episode is a solid follow-up to Ghost Train, but is obviously nowhere near as great as that masterpiece, but it's still a good episode. I appreciate that the second to last episode of this season is an episode about Thomas's branch line. Just kinda goes to show that this whole season was mainly branch line themed, which is definitely one of my favorite aspects of it. This episode details Thomas trying to get revenge on Percy for his ghostly antics, but Percy ends up getting karma on his own. A solid, funny branch line episode. Thomas and Percy's bickering is hilarious, but at the same time, by the end of the season, has gotten a little annoying. I like Jerky Thomas and Cocky Cheeky Percy, but I mean, enough is enough for one season after a while, in my opinion. So I really appreciate that after this season, they both really grow a lot, and grow past being mean to each other all the time, and instead are now supportive, kind, and playfully tease one another as best friends should. I will say, if there's one thing I strongly and respectfully disagree with Tug and a lot of other people about, is Percy and Thomas's close friendship. Although I don't need it to be all mushy and sunshine and roses, I much prefer them as close friends that although they argue and tease sometimes, a lot in earlier years, they're still best friends in the end, and would do anything for each other. As opposed to just being work colleagues that just tolerate one another and aren't that close, and that Percy's actually closer with Toby. Or maybe that's just me preferring the TV series portrayal of them as opposed to the books, where it felt like Thomas was always a cocky jerk and didn't grow as much, besides in his first 2 books. But yeah, this episode is still funny, charming, and entertaining. Everyone gets karma and makes up, so all is well in the end. Percy looks hilarious with his fur coat. Also, this is where the green caterpillar with red stripes phase originates. Ha! Funny. 8 out of 10. 21. Thomas, Percy, and Nicole. First episode of season 2 in production order, and it stars our lovable duo Thomas and Percy. And it's great. Thomas is being a cheeky asshole as he would in his younger days, and it bites him in the ass in the form of being covered in coal. But for laughing, Percy gets karma in the form of an accident of his own. But at the end, the two make up like always. I like a good Thomas's branch line episode. It's a pretty standard Thomas and Percy are assholes story, but one of the more iconic and is very funny for sure. And Thomas, Percy, and Toby are all spot on, so I respect it. Also, Thomas had to leave. He had seen everything. 20. Percy and Harold. This one follows up on Duck Takes Charge well, with Percy now working at the new harbor, where he observes a helicopter, who we all come to know as Harold. Percy and Harold have a nice rivalry, and it's fun to watch, and their race is great. So it's a memorable one, but not phenomenal. Classic nonetheless. 8 out of 10. Love how it's followed up on in Letters to Santa though, which is the superior episode in my opinion. 19. Cows. The first in the Edward saga, or episodes with Edward in them, but he doesn't really star in them. Old Iron, Birdie's Chase, and this one, but we still got him in starring roles like Saved from Scrap, and of course, everyone's favorite, Edward's Exploit, but we'll get to that one later. But anyway, this is just a cute, fun little classic episode about the big engines getting all puffed up and cocky about a subject, this time being Edward losing some cattle trucks, and antics with cows, and it's a funny one. A classic story to be sure, but nothing too memorable in my opinion. Just a story about Henry and Gordon being idiots and getting karma for it, and for what it is, it's funny and entertaining enough. The engines making such a fuss about cows is very funny and works, in my opinion. And Edward getting the last laugh is satisfying. Classic Audrey writing. Also, this line delivery from Ringo. Moo! So yeah, 8 out of 10. 18. Percy and the Signal. Now this episode is peak Thomas comedy. Percy is being a cheeky little shit and plays tricks on the big engines, who collectively decide to get their revenge and pay him out. They concoct the backing signal story, which Percy completely falls for and embarrasses himself, much to their delight. This episode is honestly hilarious and everyone's a jerk and I kinda love it. The only thing holding it back for me is that I saw it a bajillion times on DVDs growing up, so I got tired of it and never appreciated it properly until I got older. So I don't think I'll ever love it, but I do really like it. 8 out of 10. 17. Thomas and Trevor. Fun fact, this is the only second series episode to not be adapted or based on a Railway series story. It's funny because, as we all know, the writers asked Christopher Awdry, the writer of the Railway series at the time, to write more stories about Thomas in a new book for them to adapt, and so he did. And thus, War About Thomas the Tank Engine was born. But this story surprisingly wasn't one of them, and was instead a standalone story in an annual, one that served as a sequel to Saved from Scrap, and for what it is, I like it. Trevor gets more work from Topham during a less busy time at the orchard, and Thomas is sent to deliver him to the harbor to help out. Thomas is curious about the old-timer, and they have a fun little story together. Trevor is upbeat, outgoing, and likable like before, but he gets to strut his stuff and prove himself this time, and it's honestly really nice and cute. It's just a solid, good little story. Not as strong as Saved from Scrap, but still solid. Also, I love the ending music, 8 out of 10. Speaking of saved from scrap, 16, saved from scrap. I really like this episode. For some reason, when I was younger, I didn't appreciate it as much and didn't like Trevor for some reason. I guess I just found him boring at the time. But now I find this to be a fun one that fits Edward as a character perfectly. As someone who's quote-unquote old-fashioned himself, it makes sense for Edward to get paired with another older character, one that wasn't as lucky as he was and is now facing the Cutter's torch. But with Edward's help and wit, is able to be saved. Edward is spot on here and is wise, kind, and thoughtful, and I just love it. Just a perfect story for him and reminds me why I love Edward so much. A classic story with a heartwarming ending of Trevor getting bought and restored, which is just so nice. Trevor is a likable but still kinda basic character. He's alright in my book. So yeah, really great episode, but not quite amazing. It rides the line though. 8.5 out of 10. 15, Pop Goes the Diesel. The first of the Duck and Diesel episodes, one of my favorite arcs of the whole series. Duck's character, flaws and all, is on display, along with newcomer Diesel, another favorite character of mine, and both are just great in this episode. Duck is honestly cocky and self-righteous, and tricks Diesel while Diesel himself is an ass with a superiority complex, and pretends to be a charmer around everyone else. But Duck sees right through it, so Diesel kinda deserved the karma, but at the same time, it was very immature of Duck, and he will pay for it dearly. As Tug has said, and I agree with this, both of them were in the wrong in their own way. And that makes this a much more morally complex story, and I like that a lot. The grumbling and groaning sounds the trucks make are hilarious, and it's funny to see Diesel so furious. Overall, it's a great episode and sets up the saga well. 8.5 out of 10. Easily the best of the B tier. And now we get into the amazing tier, where I think all these episodes and above are honestly just amazing. 14. Percy Takes the Plunge. Now this is a fun one. Percy Takes the Plunge is an iconic episode, mainly because of its titular crash, but also because of Percy's character, as he's as cheeky and naive as ever, and it ultimately bites him in the ass and causes an accident. While I really like this episode, there is one flaw that bothers me just a little bit, and that's the continuity. As at the beginning, the events of Percy's promise are mentioned, but of course, as we all know, that wasn't adapted into an episode until Series 3, so why is it being mentioned here? It's mainly because in the books that story occurred first, so I'm not sure why they didn't do Percy's promise in this season, but whatever. So yeah, that bugs me a bit, but not too much to the point that it ruins the episode at all. Other than that, this episode is stellar and has fun moments with Henry and Percy, who bicker and tease one another in this episode, and Henry ultimately has the last laugh as Percy lets his curiosity and ego get the better of him. Percy asking the trucks to push him past the board was beyond stupid, but still classic Percy. Thomas even warns him because he himself had trouble with a board once, and like a dumbass, ignored it and had an accident. Nice continuity. Also, I think it's funny that Bill and Ben are the ones that Percy tells about his escapades, as they're even more naive than he is, so they believe him when he embellishes and fails to mention Harold's help. So yeah, excellent episode with funny moments, a great crash, and a solid message of, don't be a dumbass. 9 out of 10, classic Percy. 13, Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree. The Christmas finale to Season 2 is solid, endearing, and better than its first season counterpart. Thomas is set to deliver the big Christmas tree for the party, but ends up getting caught in the snow, and is ultimately rescued by good old Donald and Douglas, which I love. Sodor always looks so beautiful in wintertime, and Thomas Christmas episodes are always so wholesome, enjoyable, and nice. Not always great, but at least nice and get you in the holiday spirit. I love that they have a huge Christmas party with almost every character present, even Diesel for some reason. But it just feels like such a huge celebration of Thomas and his friends as a show and franchise so far. It's a wholesome story with not much depth, but the ending with all the characters makes it so special in my opinion, and is a classic Thomas Christmas story. And for that, I respect it and kinda love it. A tier. 12, The Diesel. Oh yeah, this episode is fantastic. We're introduced to Bill and Ben, the two troublesome tank engine twins, who were great, likable, and fun characters in the classic series, and, well, still good in the Brenner era, but we'll talk about that later down the line. But yeah, here they're great and very entertaining as they play a trick on a new Diesel that they thought took their trucks. But it was all just a misunderstanding. Boko is a great character too in my opinion, but not as strong as the twins in the actual series. But if we went by fan series, he'd easily be S tier. Anyway, I also love that Boko's basis is actually mentioned. That's always cool when an engine's basis is actually named. Anywho, this episode is very funny and entertaining, and I love it a lot. Very fun. Definitely near the top of A tier. 11. Duck Takes Charge. Here we're introduced to one of my favorite characters in the franchise, Duck. This one serves as a direct sequel to Percy and the Signal. As it's mentioned at the beginning, it shows us that Percy's on a mission to get back at the big engines, and with the help of Duck, he does just that. As the main line gets busier and busier, Percy is now rushed off his wheels and in need of help in the yard, so Topham brings on a new engine, Duck of course, who befriends Percy quickly and takes no nonsense, and following teasing from the big engines, decides to protest and stand up to them and demands respect, and it's awesome. Duck is a badass legend, and his character is already on full display in this one episode, and I love him so much. But this is far from his best episode, and is only our introduction to him. This episode is pretty funny too, especially the scene where they stand up to the big engines, especially with the snoring and snorting sounds and Duck snickering and stopping himself when he says, engines, as if he's stopping himself from saying something he'll regret. Overall, an amazing episode, 9 out of 10. 10. The Deputation. The Donald and Douglas episodes, and I love both of them. But I think this is the weaker of the two, and I'll talk more about the better first half and them as characters in a bit. Anyway, it's still really great. Following their adventures in the snow in this episode, it becomes a trend to see them helping clear the snow on the island in the winter throughout the series, and I like that. Anywho, after rescuing Henry from the snow, the big engines decide they must come together to save Donald and Douglas, and after asking Edward for advice, send Percy as a deputation to Topham, who listens thoughtfully as Percy nervously tries confronting him in comedic fashion, and later, Topham comes to tell them all the good news, that he's decided the twins are here to stay. I love that all the engines come together for a common goal to protect their new friends, and in the end, do so successfully. Also, the use of the word deputation is hilarious, as only Edward really understands what it means, but the other engines do have good intentions. It's so satisfying to see Donald and Douglas get to stay, and the ending is so sweet. Overall, an excellent episode. A tier. Not quite as strong as Breakfan, but still great. 9. Old Iron. Old Iron. Another story from Edward's book, and a great one at that. James is an asshole to Edward, and ultimately pays for it and his typical bullshit in the form of becoming a runaway thanks to some troublesome boys that fiddle with his controls. But is saved by, of course, Edward. I love how Thomas and Percy defend Edward in this episode. Very nice moment. The action scene of James running along the line without a driver and then being chased down and saved by Edward was great and well done. As we all know, action is always well done in Thomas, especially in the classic era, but the CGI era also kills it a lot. But yeah, great story with James and Edward, as they're both spot on here and have a great dynamic with James learning to respect Edward and Edward getting to show how brave he truly is. I like the use of human characters in this one too, and it makes sense because the engines would need help in this situation. The runaway theme is classic, and mixed with the shots of the engines creates a sense of urgency and stakes. Not as epic as other Thomas stories we'll get to down the line, but it's still really great. Overall, an excellent episode. 9 out of 10. 8. Birdie's Chase. Now here's an episode I've always found to be heavily underrated. Birdie's Chase is a fun little story about Birdie trying to catch up with Edward to deliver Thomas's passengers. Nothing too much really happens besides Birdie chasing him, but I kinda like it for that. It's a simple, charming story that gives us a different perspective of Sodor, one from the road, and it's interesting. Looks like they made a few unique sets for this episode, which I appreciate, and it's comedic and entertaining watching Birdie keep missing Edward and then finally catch up to him, all played to Birdie's catchy theme. Poor Edward was just oblivious to it all. But yeah, great episode in my opinion. I really like this one. I know it might seem like a stretch for most, but for me, it's a 9 out of 10. 7. Diesel's Devious Deed, or Dirty Work as it's known in the UK. The second part in the Duck and Diesel saga. The trucks continue to tease Diesel, which horrifies Duck, but Diesel holds a grudge and decides to get his revenge. And although Duck kinda needed to learn a lesson, he didn't deserve to be embarrassed and shunned by his friends, in my opinion. I always enjoy seeing stories that star the big engines and show them coming together on a subject, in this case Diesel and Duck, and it's nice to watch. Also, the classic, disgraceful, disgusting, despicable is said. Cool. Anywho, Diesel concocts lies about Duck calling the big engines names, and they spread quickly thanks to the troublesome trucks, and it's awful, pissing off the engines majorly, causing them to shun Duck and exile him from the sheds, with Topham sending him to work with Edward. Duck is apologetic, but it's no good. Man, poor Duck. Edward is great and all, one of the best characters in the show, but Duck didn't deserve to be sent away. Diesel is a devious asshole, and I love it. Just sucks that the big engines fell for the trick. Shows that they can be somewhat naive as a result of their egos. Excellent episode with, again, layered writing and great character work. 9.5 out of 10. A plus tier. And now we come to S tier, where only the best of the best lie. Starting with number 6, Thomas Comes to Breakfast. My personal favorite of the Thomas branch line episodes this season. Thomas gets a big head after his driver says he could go without him, and which was obviously said in jest, but he's still naive enough to believe it. This of course gets him into trouble as he brags about it to Percy and Toby, who stand for none of it. One morning, he thinks up the idea of scaring the other two by puffing out on his own, but ultimately, because a cleaner accidentally messed with his controls, he starts moving on his own, and without someone to stop him, he crashes into the station master's house, where he gets covered in rubble in a bush. The crash is classic and hilarious. Thomas got what he deserved, but I do feel bad for the station master and his family. At the end, it's mentioned that a diesel will come replace him while he's gone, much to his horror, setting up Daisy. Thomas is a complete cocky asshole in this episode, and it's so comedic and hilarious, and I love it. His big-headedness is almost always entertaining. Sometimes it gets annoying when he's just an ass without cheekiness, but it's mostly entertaining, and that's why even in his younger years, Thomas is one of my favorite characters. But he gets even better as the years go on and becomes more mature. Anywho, very funny and entertaining with solid character work and a great crash. 10 out of 10. Number 5, Wrong Road. One of the most underrated and one of my personal favorite episodes of both this season and among the top 25 of the whole series, Wrong Road is excellent. It's a story about Gordon and Edward, with Gordon learning not to be such a derogatory ass to Edward and appreciate and respect him in his branch line. I love the night shots of the engines, the use and dynamic of Gordon and Edward, with Edward being kind despite Gordon's bullshit and even teasing him a bit, the comedic nature of the mishap with the lady's green hat, and Gordon being sent down the branch line, the ending with Boko quote-unquote saving Gordon from the twins, the music, and just the atmosphere of this episode is so laid back and cozy. I just love this episode and how simple it is with a fun story and great likable characters. 10 out of 10, S tier easy, one of the best of the season. Sums up what season 2 does best. 4, Brake Van. As I said, I love the Donald and Douglas episodes, especially this one, as it's just so classic to me. I watched it a lot as a kid and always enjoyed it. Donald and Douglas are memorable, strong, and likable characters with, as we'll come to see in the next season, distinct personalities, with Donald being the less mature, more irritable, and more jokey one, and Douglas the more mature, laid-back twin, who I personally prefer but still love Donald too. Donald and Douglas unintentionally cause trouble, especially with a naughty brake van who receives his own karma, and it's entertaining. I love that Donald stands up for his twin, but he shouldn't have abused the brake van. Just isn't right. And what, he just dies at the end? Huh? Also, Donald's face here is just priceless. Both crashes are fun too. I like those. Also, the bickering between the twins and James here is hilarious as they tease him about his past, but make up later off screen. And I love that Douglas willingly helps James without hesitance. Just sucks that the missing coach is, well, missing from the saga, as it probably would give it more depth. But for what it is, I love this episode, as the character work is just spot on, and the twins learn to be more careful and patient and fear the worst as Toppa must make up his mind. But that's for the next story. As a kid though, I didn't see Deputation until much later, as I didn't have the DVD with that episode, so I never knew what happened until I was like 8 when I rented the DVD from my local library. Anyway, excellent episode. 3, A Close Shave. The finale to the Duck and Diesel saga, and it rules. Duck is sent to work with Edward, who consoles and comforts him and asks for his help, leaving Duck feeling better and useful once again. All's well until some trucks break away on the hill and chase Duck down, causing him to become a runaway himself, and tries his hardest to stop them and only barely misses hitting another train and instead runs into a barber shop, much to his embarrassment. This episode doesn't necessarily have as strong or complex character work as the last one in the saga, but makes up for it with great action and tension. The accident is treated extremely seriously, and I love it so much. Strong contrast to the Brenner era where crashes are treated like a joke, huh? But is followed by the barber hilariously putting cream all over Duck's face as punishment, but apologizes upon hearing of his heroic efforts. I love the line, "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were being a brave engine." "That's alright, sir. I didn't know that either." Topham informs Duck that thankfully, Big Engine's learned of Diesel's lies, and that he himself never believed them either and wants him back in the yard, and that Diesel was sent away. Very nice, satisfying ending. Only wish we saw how Diesel was found out and sent away, but I guess that doesn't matter. What matters is that our hero Duck got his redemption, and is now back on track to his happy life. Love this episode, the crash, Duck's humble character, The music, the shots, and the tension that's built up thanks to it all. Duck had a very strong character arc this season, learning to not be so cheeky or vengeful, and instead more kind and patient, and I love it. And moving forward, Duck is a more mature engine, and that's why I love him so much. Sure, he'll still play tricks at times, but it's usually all in good fun and never harms anyone. So yeah, excellent episode. S tier. 2. Edward's Exploit. Arguably one of the best episodes of the whole series, this is Edward's greatest starring role in my opinion, as his determination, compassion, and never give up mindset are all on display, and I just love it. Edward struggles at the beginning, which the big engines mock and tease him about, but Duck and Boko stand up for him, and Edward manages to pull away. Love that they defend him. Later, Edward struggles once more when taking the visitors home, but being the badass he is, despite breaking down, manages to get back up and persist and gets them home, tired but triumphant. Edward gets the chance to prove himself, and it's so satisfying. Awesome. This episode has so many great lines. Edward's old, but he'll surprise us all. And battered, weary, but unbeat. Edward is just so awesome, lovable, and easy to root for in this one. Although his breakdown isn't as bad as it was in the books, it still serves its purpose and plays its role, and Edward is forced to work harder than ever to get them home. And it's so satisfying seeing him win the day by managing to pull the train and get everyone home. I love it. It's also fun to see Bill and Ben's minor appearance when they take the visitors on a tour of the China Clay Works. And the music, as always, slaps. But damn, it's good here when Edward is triumphant. For some reason, I used to not appreciate this episode as much growing up. I always liked it, but only came to love it in recent years. Overall, one of the best episodes of the season and one of the best of the whole series ever. 10 out of 10, S tier. And the number one spot goes to, as I'm sure you all can tell, Ghost Train. And here it is, the best episode of season 2, and one of the best and most iconic in the whole series in my book. This episode is strongly written, extremely well scored, entertaining, shot impressively, and is just all around spooky and creepy thanks to all of these traits and the atmosphere it creates for the characters and us, the audience. Almost every set is ominous and creepy, and it just helps build the tension and tone of the episode, and it's done so well. The main musical theme gives me the chills every time I hear it because of how much it scared me as a kid and let me know, oh yeah, something's coming. Even though I knew the ghost wasn't real or anything, but it just got you in the mood for spooks and scares, and when used in fan series for real ghosts, is all the more terrifying, but nothing beats the original. Percy tells Thomas and Toby a ghost story, which neither of them believe, but after an accident that leaves him white as a ghost, Percy and Toby band together to scare the shit out of Thomas, and it ultimately works. I take it back, this is technically the best Thomas's Branchline episode. But because it feels so off-brand and different altogether, I count it as a separate thing, an independent story, which is just followed up on a woolly bear, but still. Anyway, this episode is just perfect in every way. One of the best of the whole series. All the characters are spot on, narration from both Carlin and Ringo is effective, the atmosphere is disturbing, for a kid's show at least, but still creepy in general. The music is fitting, the sets are well made, and even has funny moments when Percy scares Thomas, mixed with the creepy beginning and middle. Overall, just a masterpiece of an episode. I just wish there was a tease that maybe there is a real ghost like in some other episode, but still, basically perfect. 10 out of 10. The best episode of the season, and one of the best the show has to offer. Every Halloween, I know what Thomas episode I'm gonna watch. And that, my friends, was season 2. And honestly, it mostly held up really well. Again, not a single bad episode, just a few okay ones, and quite a few standouts. The character work is mostly stellar. It introduces 4 of my all-time favorite characters of the show. The music is better, it looks great set and color-wise, and the stories are almost all entertaining and strong. It is most definitely one of the best seasons of the show. But, I'll be honest, it's still not perfect or quite my favorite. It's in the top 5 for sure. I mean, it's classic, but for me, there just isn't as many banger 10 out of 10 episodes in this season as there are in the other classic seasons, in my opinion. On top of that, it's not as pretty as the other seasons. Still looks great, of course, but not as excellent as the seasons to follow, in my opinion. And overall, it just felt a little less sincere than the other seasons. I can't really explain it. Maybe it's all the bickering and more mean-spirited nature of a good number of character interactions and dynamics, but then again, that can be a good chunk of Thomas's classic series and even Railway series writing in general. And usually, I love seeing the engines bicker, but I love them even more when they come together, and personally, I didn't see that as much nor as many heartwarming stories as there are in the other seasons. And for that, it's a 9.3 out of 10, and one of the best. I will always love it and have much nostalgia for it, but it'll never be my number one. Thanks for watching, folks. Let me know your thoughts, rankings, and critiques of this season, and all it has to offer in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!